What's up, BookTube? It's Monty, and today I'm back with another review, and today we'll be talking about The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Before I went on my BookTube hiatus, this book was popping, and at the time, what was popping were the negative reviews. Nobody was liking this book. It was very fashionable to have rant reviews of this book. I went away, I came back, and now everyone is in love with this book. I mean, I know before, during the rant review period, people liked it. Like, that was a thing. And personally, I see both sides. Mainly, I see how people ranted about this book, because I do think that this book veers into, like, a romanticization of toxic behavior. But at the same time, there's a part of me, and this could just be me overestimating Jude as a main character, that feels like that could be subverted. I don't know if Holly Black is a good enough writer for that, because I don't think that this book really gives a person the basis for that. But I'm going to hope anyway. So before I get into spoilers, if you don't know, if you somehow lived under a rock and have yet to pick this up, The Cruel Prince is the story of Jude, her twin sister, kind of, like, not really at all. But Jude, and her life as a human in the Fae realm, and wanting to have a more secure position amongst the Fae and attaining power. I think that's a pretty good broad strokes, no spoilers, sort of what's going on here. It is a fantasy book, but it reads a lot like a contemporary. And I think that's one of my main issues with this book. It reads like a contemporary because I don't think that the Fae aspects are at all important. Chief amongst that is, like, the world building is just shit. It not only wants you to have, like, a knowledge of Fae, which I think is fine, like, nothing against that, but then I think that it wants to, like, sort of drop in these moments that are, like, relatable to humans, but, like, it wants to be a fantasy, like, just a regular fantasy, but also, like, an urban fantasy. And so, like, we get a scene with them at the mall, and we get a scene with, like, Jude undressing in front of fairies, and they're like, why are you wearing a bra? And it's like, Jude isn't the only human. Like, she's not. And I understand the other humans don't have, like, fairy sisters that are taking them to the mall every 3 seconds, but I feel like that was, like, it wasn't necessary. Just like I don't think it was, personally, I have never experienced a period. I never will experience a period. And so it's not my place to comment on it. I'm not saying that it didn't need to be in the book. But my thing was, if you're going to comment about how fairies do have periods and address how they do that, like, that's fine. But what I really need to understand is how a fairy and a human are conceiving a child. Like, if the human women that they've kidnapped are single-handedly responsible. Well, I guess they haven't kidnapped. They made a deal. Are single-handedly keeping the fairy race alive, which is what is said in this book. Because fairies, they have a hard time conceiving children. So the human women that they have in Elfhame and the other courts and places are single-handedly keeping the fairy race alive. Jude's own sister is half Fae, half human. I need to know how that works. Because that would mean that the humans are genetically similar to the fairy. And if that's the case, I feel like they should have more in common. Because the humans and the fairies don't seem to have a lot of common. Like, they don't. Like, the fairies have all of these abilities. They have all of these extra characteristics, and then the mortals are just human. Like, they're just like you and me. And so I feel like if that's gonna be like a crux of your world and you're not gonna explain it, but I have to know that they have, like, bad menstrual pads, again, maybe it's just me. Again, my opinion on that is not the end all be all, but I don't know. There was a part of me every time that that Jude was making out with a fairy, that I was like, this just feels really gross to me because that's a fairy and you're a human. And like, maybe that's wrong of me. Maybe I'm bigoted. I don't know. But it really, on a like level, it really was like not cute. Like, cause then it had me thinking about fairy dick, and I don't want to think about fairy dick. I don't. I have gone 22 years without thinking of fairy dick, and now in year 23, about to be 24, here a bitch is thinking about fairy dick because Jude keeps kissing fairies. That aside, that's like the world building thing. The writing was fine. It wasn't remarkable to me. There wasn't any moment where I was like, that was a good line. But it wasn't terrible. It was compelling-ish. It took me around 100, 150 pages to really get into it, to really drive with it. Part of that, I will say, was the fact that it's written in first person. And like most of the novels I've read recently are written in third. And so it wasn't that I hated Jude or I felt disconnected from Jude, although I did. Because I'll get into this in a minute. For like the first 75-ish pages, it felt like Game of Thrones fan fiction, where we had Cardan as our Joffrey, Jude as our Arya, and Jude's sister Taryn as our Sansa. And so that's sort of like how I carried on through the rest of the book, and so maybe that's why I liked Taryn more than most people do, because I will fucking die for Sansa. But the first 75 pages were slow, because I was getting used to, it was like bad Game of Thrones fan fiction, but it was also just like me getting used to first person and getting introduced to Jude. But about 100, 150 pages in, I was set on the first person. I was set on Jude. We were coming out to like our first big moment in the book. It does sort of fizzle out. It doesn't really go anywhere or do anything, but it does. I am grateful for the tournament, if only because it then pivots the story into where we're going for the rest of the book. And I like the pivot. I thought the pivot was good. I liked the middle part, although I do think that I have major issues with the fact that Cardan was absent from the second act of the story. So the second act of the story, after the pivot, Cardan is absent, and then he comes back in for the final third, and that's where I think it really jumps the shark a little bit. I would recommend that people pick it up if you haven't already, just before I get into spoilers. It is a little bit slow, like I said, but it does pick up. And if nothing else, this book is hella messy. And I love it. I love it for the mess. Like I said, I do think it exemplifies some, like, and glorifies toxic behavior. But we'll get more into that in the spoiler section. So, let's talk spoilers. Going back to the first act of the book, when we're introduced to Cardan and Jude, and their interactions together, this is why I felt like bad Game of Thrones fan fiction, because it felt like Joffrey, but like on a SNL level. So whereas Joffrey in Game of Thrones, like, I took him very seriously as a 13-year-old child who was like batshit, Cardan was just like the SNL version of that. So he would do things that were extreme, but it was like he would do the most, and it didn't feel natural to like the character or the setting. It was just like exaggerated, and everything else that was happening in this book is very not that. Like, it's very grounded, I would say. So when you have like this heightened cruelty, and I know that it's called The Cruel Prince, don't come at me, don't at me in the comments. Like, I can read. I read this. This isn't Holly Black's first book. Like, this is like her 37th time out at the fucking races. So she should have some characterization down at this point. And I felt that his characterization was just off. Like, it didn't feel like a genuine person was doing these things, saying these things, being present in these situations. From the first scene at the party where he, like, rips off a fairy's wings, to when he pushes Jude in the river, to the party scene, which, side note, Jude had no fucking business showing up at that kickback. She had no business being there with Valerian and Locke and Nicasia, whatever the fuck her name is, and Cardan. None of these hoes like you. None of these hoes like you. Why are you here? Who rolls up to the function where no one likes you, where 3 of the hoes have actively tried to kill you, the 4th hoe stood by and watched? Why are you here? Of all the things that Jude did in this book that were dumb as fuck, going to that party was the dumbest. The dumbest. And I feel like I know that she was there and it set up the Acorn subplot, but could have happened any other kind of way. Could have happened any other kind of way. Because that shit was dumb. Dumb. So, at all these events where Cardan is out here doing the most and being extra and, like, hating on Jude, dumb as fuck. The Locke, Taryn, Jude love triangle situation was also dumb as fuck. It just was. But again, Jude being with Locke made no sense. I know people said in their reviews that they called it, that they saw this coming. I'm not gonna lie to you hoes. Like, I did not see it coming. I wasn't like shook and shaken, but I didn't know. I didn't predict it, but I also wasn't trying to predict shit that was happening in this book. So I will say that I agree with Taryn, because at no point during the Locke-Jude courtship situation that no one seems to even like be invested in. So why people hate Taryn for this blows my fucking mind. Cause like, bitch, you don't even care about this relationship. How you gonna hate her? Like, that was her man. Like, how you gonna hate her for being there for her man? When fucking Jude was the one trying to kill people over him, which again made no sense because we knew that Jude didn't fuck with Locke. But you want me to believe she's going into a sword fight over this man? Bitch, where? Where in the novel is that supported? Where is the textual evidence? The whole time she's with Locke, she's like, I don't even like him. So when Taryn called her on that shit, she was right. She was right. She was right. Like, Jude didn't want that man. She didn't want that fairy dick. She wants a fucking throne. A fucking crown. That's what Jude wants. She don't care about no dick. So, it blew my mind. Because, like, Taryn was right. She just, like, Jude wanted Locke for what? For what? Taryn and Locke were already a thing. They were already a couple. She was sworn to secrecy. Just like Jude was sworn to secrecy regarding fucking Prince Dane. Like, I mean, the Prince Dane stuff, I guess, is like a little bit higher level. But it's a similar oath. They couldn't talk about it. Like, you have Madoc existing. His whole existence is worse than Tarn existing, in my opinion. That was another thing I didn't think was handled very well, was the whole epilogue where we have Madoc just killing people in cold blood, and then Jude's trauma of that never being addressed. Like, we have talks about how she feels conflicted, that, you know, the man who killed her parents practically raised her, who taught her everything she knows, at least all the things she knows that she's good at and she's excelling at. Like, that part of her was made by the man that killed her parents. I thought that was an interesting conversation, but I always felt that it was very surface level. Like, it was never deeper. Like, it didn't dig into that. And Jude really grew on me over the course of the book. I know people had an issue with, like, the second part, the second act of the story where she does her secret agency spying stuff, but I appreciated it. The only thing I didn't appreciate about that was, again, Cardan was missing. But secondly, I think the worst part of the whole book that should have been fucking cut, I don't know why it was left in, was when she rescued Sophie. It was when she rescued Sophie, and then even when she stole Alice in Wonderland. Like, both of those were just really weird moments that didn't really matter. I know when she stole Alice in Wonderland, she also got to witness the whipping of Cardan, but that didn't feel like, that was sort of when it started to, like, romanticize and excuse his abusive behavior that I wasn't here for. So maybe this needed, like, a dual perspective. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I would have enjoyed reading from two perspectives. Maybe in, like, 13 years we'll get a book from Cardan's perspective. I don't know. But I needed something, because what we got from Jude never made me believe that Cardan was being abused. And even if he was, that's still, spoiler alert, Miss Holly Black, that still doesn't excuse like, abusive behavior. Like, not how that works. So that part did make sense, but also Sophie being, like, kidnapped and taken away. Why? At no point did Jude ever care about any of the other humans left in Fairy. In fact, the other humans weren't really brought up until she was a spy and she had to disguise herself as one. And that's when we learned that they were like single-handedly responsible for keeping the fairy race alive because fairies can't give birth that often or something stupid. But her stealing Sophie made no sense because before that and even after that, Jude didn't give a fuck about the other humans in Fae. Like, she didn't care. She did not care. Like, that was not her motivation, and that's fine. I didn't care that she didn't care about the mortals. I was here for her on this mission to get the throne, to get power, to be something above what she was. I was here for that. So this detour was weird, and I thought it was weird for them to have her older sister Vivian be like, you know, she's not mom. Because I didn't think that Jude cared. I didn't think that Jude cared about their mom. So overall, I gave this book 2 stars because I liked it, but it wasn't a like it. It was like it was okay. That's really what it was. It was okay. So I gave it 2 stars because it was okay. I don't hate it. I see everything that is problematic that everybody else sees. And I don't think there was anything that was exemplary to balance it out. Personally, I am going to continue on with this series though. I currently have a hold on The Wicked King, so I don't know when it'll be available. Until then, let's have this conversation. I'm looking forward to a lovely that happening. I'm looking forward to it. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours down in the comment section below. Tweet me on Twitter. Do whatever you need to do. But I'll see you when I see you. And until then, bye.